Hey everybody, what's going on? I'm David Castillo from Saint Vitus Bar, and welcome to the Age of Quarantine. We have my man Liam Cormier from the Cancer Bats, lead singer, here tonight hanging out with us. Amazing dude. I've met him on tour years ago, and we just remained friends ever since. I love him to death, and just super excited to have him here. While I have you guys, if you want independent venues to survive the pandemic, go to saveourstages.com after this interview. It'll take you like 30 seconds and you can get in touch with Congress. Thanks so much. I am really excited to see Liam. It's been a minute. I think that he's up in the chat now. Let's see here. Here he is. And we're going to add him up. There
I was like,
young
my Canadian internet.
The fuck?
My Canadian internet.
What's up?
Let me try and steady this.
Steady the cam, dude. Steady the cam. I believe in you.
I know. I got like the, the classic. I'm sure everyone looking at home when you're trying to charge your phone, but you also have to prop your phone up because you're doing an IG Live, and it's like wobbling. It's like trying to. It's real.
It's real. Liam, it's so fucking good to see you. One of my favorite people, a beautiful, positive, dynamic young man from Canada. I mean, who doesn't love that? Liam, where are you right now?
Right now I'm in Halifax, Nova Scotia.
And you moved back to Halifax. It's a calamity, people. You're gonna make it.
I might have to. Oh no, this will work. I was like, I think you can roll. So I'm basically for all the Americans who maybe didn't have access to geography in high school. I'm in the Atlantic part of Canada, which is kind of like if you go to Maine, like you go as far north as you possibly could, and then you hung a right. Because I'm actually an hour ahead of you in a time zone, all to my own.
Oh shit, your own time zone. Okay, sounds
yeah,
cool, man. So
we're learning lots.
I start off these interviews kind of in the same way, and I mean now it's kind of a while. But if you weren't in Halifax, do you know where you'd be right now, man?
At your house?
Maybe. I don't know. That would be cool.
No, if I wasn't in Halifax, where would I be?
Yeah, I don't know. Would you be touring? Would you be doing anything like that?
Oh, sorry. I was like, what would I be doing? Is it all theoretical?
It is now.
No, if I wasn't in Halifax right now, Cancer Bats actually had planned on taking this year off. So we had pretty light touring. So I would have actually been here. That's why I decided to move, was because I knew I would have like time to kind of live out here and hang and have a whole summer. And
that's cool.
Kind of just like for Cancer Bats, we're all kind of spread out. So it was like, oh, we'll just work on new tunes. We'll like meet up in Toronto, or we'll meet up in Winnipeg, or we'll meet up wherever, and we can just jam and sort of work remotely. So it was like, okay, that's the vibe.
Yeah, totally. So let's start from the top. So this is basically, these shows are like, kind of your musical journey in an hour. So okay. We're going to go. So where did you grow up in Canada?
I grew up in Southern Ontario for the most part. So around Newmarket and Waterloo, which is like an hour and a half from Toronto. We talked about this because it's kind of like the same vibe that we had growing up in like a remote suburb to like the big city. Yeah. It's sort of like what you guys have growing up in Long Island.
Yeah, like me and Artie.
People grow up in like New Jersey, where you're like, you've got a scene, it's really sick. There's a lot of like cool bands doing stuff, but then there's always this bigger city idea that's like there.
Yeah.
So even though you have your own thing going on and you're playing shows in halls and you're doing all that stuff, it's like they're still the big city.
Yeah, totally. Like, but the specter of Toronto is always there, kind of like hanging over.
Yeah, and that's still like even though you can draw kids in your hometown or the towns around you, it's sort of like nobody cares until you play shows in the city.
Yeah,
kind of. Like as far as like the local scene goes, they're like, well, I don't know. It's cool that you play London, Ontario. It's cool that you play Guelph, but
I played London. I played London one time, and I remember you telling me that you were like, "Yeah, man, you're headed to the burbs, baby. You're
you're real when you've done." Because that's the thing. There's like a whole circuit of like these cities that are around Toronto, and to be honest, like the hardcore scene, it was always, amazing shows. Probably like the same for you, and like Long Island. It's like you have these humongous shows because none of these kids can actually go into the city.
Yeah, I mean, it's just kind of far enough away where you're just like, okay, well, we kind of have our own thing, but then you have the city too, and it really is like, for us, like one big tri-state area kind of scene, and kind of thing of that nature, with just like, an hour and a half roughly that it encompasses. So you can always sort of pull from that. So just to sort of start around there, when was the first time that you realized that you were starting to really gravitate towards music when you were like a kid?
Since I was like a really young kid, like I grew up like with, access to like my dad's record collection, like listen to like tons of rad music, like all of his like old LPs, like I would put on like, like Allman Brothers and like, Rolling Stones and like Taj Mahal and like Doobie Brothers and like all this like cool stuff. But like tons of like rad, like rock and roll like that.
Gotcha. So it was just kind of always sort of on, and then you kind of had that. When did you start kind of, kind of discovering your tastes, and then sort of like, being like, okay, now this is like my music now. When did that start happening?
Probably when I got into skateboarding. So like in the late 90s, like getting into skateboarding, watching like skateboarding and snowboarding like videos. Mm. Like having all of that as like such a cool like kind of like gateway to all this music. Like skateboarding, there was always like tons of crazy hip hop stuff like that. Like snowboarding, there was always like tons of punk and metal. So we would just like pause the credits because it was like before the internet. So we would like pause the credits of like these videos and then like write down the names of the bands and like literally go into our local music store and just like ask them about what was there. Like this was like our icebreaker because we'd be like, who is Metallica? Yeah. And they're like, oh
yeah. The first time I ever heard Iron Maiden was on Welcome to Hell. And like all those 411 video cassettes and stuff like video magazines that were coming out on and shit. I'm from the East Coast, so I feel like snowboarding, although there's snowboarding here, like real serious shit, is more West Coast a little bit. Like Vermont, Maine a little bit, but like Tahoe and Colorado and Montana. And so I felt like that was a little like ahead of the curve for us. But I remember I actually toured one time with Madball in Canada, and we played 2 nights back to back in Quebec City, and we just hung out at like this snowboarder bar 2 nights in a row, like with widows, and just got fucking shit-faced at the snowboarder bar, and they were playing the best music. And there was like,
wait, was it Bureau de Post? Was it like an old post office?
I think so. It was
pretty cool. And they play like tons of snowboard videos and like
and I was just like, this is so bizarre to me because like there would never be in the United States, I don't think, like a snowboard bar so much per se. I don't know. Like skateboarding and skateboard culture shit, but and I loved it. I was like, oh man, maybe this feels very Canadian to me.
Yeah. That bar is sick. And like the food's all like $5.
Yeah, the food was cheap as fuck, and I'm just like,
I totally
like, man, shout out Bureau de Post, set it off, boys. Yeah, it was great. We had an awesome time, and they were playing cool tunes, and it was great. And so just, for me, it was more skateboarding, but it was like those cultures, it was like, you see some dude ripping or whatever, and you're like, what is that song? And that was huge for me. and the mode of dress and stuff. Like, you know, like
Oh,
I was
fully.
wearing a Misfit shirt. I'm like, what's that? You know?
Yeah. Or like, yeah, in Thrasher magazine, there's like an ad for like, yeah, Misfits records or Black Flag records, and you're like, oh, okay, like I'm a 13-year-old skateboarder. This is like what I have to listen to, obviously, because it's in like Thrasher. Transworld Skateboarding used to have a thing too back in the day where they had like free CDs if you subscribed, so you could pick like it was like tons of crazy stuff. There'd be like Dinosaur Jr., Carcass, Fluff, like Overwhelming Color Fast, like just this huge spectrum of bands. And we would, again, because we couldn't subscribe to Transworld Skateboarding in Canada, so we would just take this like list of like free CDs that they would give out, and then again we would like just order all of those records. So I remember getting like Carcass, like artwork when I was like 14 years old. Me and my friends just got it. We had no idea what it even sounded like. Like it was just like indie rock, punk, whatever, and we get Carcass and we're like, oh, this is like really heavy, like not what we were expecting. And then the next CD we put in is like literally like Dinosaur Jr. and we're like, oh, okay.
Yeah. It's like
just like whatever we could get.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like there is sort of like a now you know what you're getting yourself into so much more because of the internet. And I feel like there was a real like you're just like crashing into stuff blind back then. Like you just kind of go around and be like, oh man, like all right, that's not what I expected this to sound like, but the artwork makes me think that,
Yeah.
So once you started kind of getting into skateboarding and discovering that stuff, what was this sort of the transition into becoming, like Liam the musician, Like,
I mean, I always wanted
participating.
I always wanted to like, because also in the 90s, obviously like grunge music was huge as well. Which I think for a lot of us kids, it felt like that bar was really like lowered in terms of like almost like where punk was at, where you were just like, oh, this music is like really accessible in that like I'm 14 and I can like, bang along to the drums to like this, or I've got 2 drumsticks and I can like play on my couch and I can like play along ish. Whereas I felt like a lot of like skate punk still felt like really far because you had to be like I was like learning how to play drums when I was like 14, and I was like, oh my god, like getting all these punk records that were so fast and technical, like even like Lagwagon and anything like on Fat Records. I remember
like that shit was really hard to play, and like I mean, at its I think pinnacle is like Propaganda, right? In my where it's like
pure thrash.
Yeah, it like borders on this sort of nexus between thrash and sort of like that sort of like Fat Records sort of punk sound, and you're like, wow, this is taken to like all of its extremes are sort of like converging there. But those drums and that stuff, it's like I didn't really realize until I started playing music, because I would just be like singing along to like Punk and Drublick or something like that, and when I started playing and like singing and stuff, I was like, well, the melodies and all this stuff are pretty simple, but Jesus Christ, that drummer, that bass player, they're playing at like warp speed.
Yeah, everything is like so technical, and that's like, so for me when I first started like playing music, I was like, oh man, I'm just gonna play indie rock. So I would just like play along with like Sonic Youth like cassettes and like just like try and learn like Radiohead records, because I was like, this is like way easier for me as like a 15-year-old. But then also probably because I wasn't that good of a drummer, I like quickly like got asked to sing in a band even before I thought I was like a singer. I remember being at a show with like a bunch of my friends. Actually, we were at a Goldfinger show in Kitchener, and I was like, this is probably in 1997. I was watching Goldfinger, and I was singing along to like probably Punk and Drublick or something that was like being played in the bar. And I was just like goofing around, like singing to all my friends. And the next day, my friend John was like, oh, like, you were really good at singing last night. And like, you were stage diving during Goldfinger. Like, you should be the front man for my punk band. And I was like, oh, but I'm a drummer. And he was like, we have a really good drummer, so you should be the singer. And then that was it. I was like, pretty much like I didn't play drums in a band for like probably 5 years after that. I just like
pretty amazing how like there are these like small turning points, or what seems so small. Like I was singing along to in a bar, and it like changed your life. Like this,
fully.
All of a sudden, you got cast as this other kind of person, right? Because it's just, I always think that this is one of the more interesting parts in anybody's story, is like how they actually became, or they chose the instrument. Oh, my dad wanted me to play the guitar, or like, oh, you know what? Actually, you know, like my sister had this old keyboard laying around, and like that's what started.
Yeah.
And so for you, it was, I'm at a show, my friends heard me sing, and you have the personality for it. You're a great frontman. So I think.
Well, and that was the funny part, was that he saw that. He was like, oh, you were singing along. But the big thing was that I like probably stage dove like 3 or 4 times. And he was like, that was crazy. Like, you were stage diving. And I was like, that's punk, man.
Yeah.
I probably skanked too.
Yeah, not a bad skill to have in your line of work. So basically that started, and so that was sort of where singing sort of started for you. And what was it like just being in those bands and kind of playing your first shows, and how did that kind of feel like? Like, did you guys do anything sort of notable? What was the name of the band?
The band was called Another Heather.
Uh-huh.
And it was like a ska punk band, which was like pretty fun, which they had already been like kind of going. So I think my friend John wanted a front person. So I like showed up, and they already had like probably like 7 or 8 songs. So I think I probably practiced with them like 2 or 3 times, and then we played like a punk house, and like we started playing shows like pretty much right off the bat. And I was like, oh, this is actually like really fun. Like fronting a band is fun, and like getting to like, we would like pile into like, you know, everyone's lawn cars and like go to all these places. And I was like, yeah, this is sick. Like, oh, okay. Like, I don't miss playing drums at this point, because I'm just like in a punk band.
Yeah.
And we're doing it. And there was like such a cool scene at the time. There was like, you know, tons of punk bands, but also because it was like small, there'd be like emo bands and hardcore bands, and Boy was like, you know, really popular. So there'd be like all these like traditional kind of like Boy and ska bands that would play, which was like really fun for us too, because it was like such like a weird, like neat scene.
Yeah, totally. I feel like at that time too, it was all kind of, although there were like, you know, a hardcore scene, more of a punk scene, things of that nature, but those things would cross over a lot. Like, it would all just sort of be under like an alternative umbrella, I think was happening, right? So it kind of like, there was a lot of that, and not as tightly curated as things can sort of be now, where people are like, I want to listen to old school death metal.
Yeah, exactly. And there's 5 death metal bands in your city, and they can all play. Whereas like this was also like, we need, you know, like 30 kids to come so we can rent out, you know, the basement bar of this like Chinese restaurant. So as long as 30 kids come and pay $5 each, like, we're covered.
Yeah.
So I felt like that was like also part of the, like, if you invite, you know, 5 different bands, hopefully they'll bring, you know, 6 friends. And
we're gonna pray that you guys got some homies, man. We're gonna pray.
Yeah, exactly. You're like, okay, the death mode. I mean, there was definitely, at that time, there was like, yeah, some like real, we'd have like a band that sounded like Deicide, or maybe they were even like covering Deicide.
Yeah.
I don't know, but it would be like that kind of thing. Like, we would play ska, there'd be a band that would like sound like Deicide, there'd be like a skate punk band that would play, and then yeah, like sometimes there'd be like a band from Toronto too. We'd like just mix all these shows together.
Yeah, that's pretty much, I feel like that's like a lot, like in the 90s, that was, you know, I saw Catch-22 and Madball play together. I saw all sorts of weird combinations and stuff like that, and like, you know, Bless and Jake and Hatebreed and shit. So
yeah,
there was all of this like really wild like cross-pollination. When so you'd been doing that for a little while and stuff, and when did you start transitioning into more of like, hey, I want to play hardcore, or did you start getting enamored in with like, that particular scene or anything like that?
Well, that was so from playing all those like kind of different shows and having stuff get like mashed together, we started playing shows with like The Swarm and like Countdown to Oblivion, like these like war, like crazy, like brutal, heavy bands. And we were just like we played, okay, I'm pretty sure it was with Countdown to Oblivion, and which was like they had two singers. The songs were all like chaos. They just like destroyed. They probably played for like 10 minutes and just like destroyed the whole room. They were wearing like balaclavas. It was like super intense. And our band basically like broke up the next day. We have to be in a hardcore band. Like that was like it kind of like felt like so meaningless afterwards to just be like playing, some like ska punk. But it was really funny because we like basically like we were like a popular ska punk band, and then we broke that band up to start this hardcore band called United Youth Crew. Yeah, exactly. Like we just like wanted to sound like Hatebreed, Earth Crisis, Snapcase, like just like Victory Style 2.
Yeah.
Is like what we were trying to sound like, and then we all of a sudden we would have like 200 kids at our shows. It would be sick, and then it just like went to like classic hardcore where there was like 20 kids are at the show, like no one cares, and we had to like build it back up like again from scratch.
So that was sort of the next iteration of kind of what you were involved with and stuff. And,
yeah.
And then at the same time, if I remember correctly, like, is that when you started playing with other bands, and then you started to kind of like know of Mikey and a couple other people that then started forming Cancer Bats?
That was, so I probably didn't start Cancer Bats for a while, but yeah, that was when I started like being in the hardcore scene, and like it would have been like when Mikey was in Figure 4.
That was like Figure 4. I was
Mikey
I'm a little rusty on the Canadian hardcore. You'll have to excuse me.
Yeah.
Even though Chris Callahan and all them and Jonah Falco, much respect, love y'all. But yeah, Figure 4. That was the band that I was thinking of. I'm not sure if it was you or Mikey who was in that band, but that band was a pretty big deal in Canadian.
Yeah. That's what I was gonna say. Like they were like a huge kind of like band as far as like Canadian hardcore went, especially like at that time, because that was like late '90s. Like that was like a band that toured in the States and like did a lot of stuff. When like there was like a few other bands, like Buried Inside was like starting to do some stuff like around the time when they got like signed to Relapse. Like that was like kind of like that same sort of like era. And then that's when I kind of also UIC, like United Youth Crew, we all broke up because people wanted to do different things. And then I was like all in. I was like just wanted to do hardcore. I just wanted to tour. Like by that point I was just like all I cared about.
Yeah. So then at that point, and then that was like, okay, I need to kind of come up with my next iteration for my kind of journey in music. And that's, was Cancer Bats conceived sort of by you, or were you just kind of like, I'm looking for people to play with and I'm going to figure something out?
Yeah, so I was in a bunch of different bands. At this point I played drums in a band called Shipwreck, which was like a straight edge Shipwreck.
Really? You were in Shipwreck?
Yeah, I was in Shipwreck.
I'm learning things. Amazing.
And then Shipwreck went on to become Urban Blight, basically. And then I played drums in Urban Blight for any of the shows outside of Toronto. So I was like their touring guy. And then they had this dude, Jason, who played drums on basically the records and like all the Toronto Hamilton shows, which I was fine because I got to like, play the Montreal shows and like go on tour in the States and like do lots of fun stuff. And then I was also in a screamo band at that time. I sang in a screamo band called Vincent Black Shadow. And that
Black
band
Shadow was you too? Jesus Christ, I'm learning so much. I'm losing it.
And then Vincent Black Shadow was like around the same time as like Alexis on Fire. So when Alexis on Fire started, there was like a big screamo scene because Grade was really big.
Yeah, I remember. I mean, Grade was Grade was also very popular on Long Island. I think obviously there was some of that '90s sort of hardcore.
Yeah.
And, you know, they had a lot of melody and kind of heavy stuff, and that played well, obviously, in the land of, you know, Glassjaw and other things of that nature.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
Grade came down to New York and to the island as well, both like the city and the island. It was like the shows are pretty hype for sure.
I want to say that record, Separate the Magnets, came out on Second Nature, too. Maybe.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So maybe that. But anyways, yeah, so that was like because of Grade, basically we were just like, Screamo is sick. So that was like that whole, so like Silverstein, Alexis on Fire, like that Vincent Black Shadow band I was in. So that was when I was like starting to do more stuff and like kind of be more.
And at that point, you moved to Toronto at a certain point.
Yeah, I was like pretty much like part of the Toronto scene at that point. And then I for a while lived in Montreal. So
really?
I was, yeah. So I like pieced out on Toronto. I left, went to Montreal, and like hung out there for like a hot minute. And then like tried to start a band there, but like couldn't. And then that's when I started Cancer Bats.
Oh, interesting. See, I went from, I skipped the Montreal phase. Why Montreal for a hot second? I mean, it's a killer city. I love it there. But.
Yeah, very sick. I was sort of like not, you know, like Shipwreck stuff was like kind of whatever. I wasn't really like sure what was going on. And then my girlfriend at the time got accepted to school in Montreal. And I was like, sick, let's go.
Yeah.
I'm down for whatever. So then we went to Montreal. They had like such a killer hardcore scene there too. And there's lots of straight edge kids. There was lots of cool stuff going on. It was really cheap too. Like, it's a cool city to live in for no money.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I've always just enjoyed it. I played shows there with White Witches Pact and Primitive Weapons and Montreal. Jesus, great. I mean, I loved it. And obviously, you know, a different flavor, a different Canada.
Yeah,
for sure too. So that's like for me at least, that was pretty fun. So in Montreal, it was like you couldn't really get. I feel like Cancer Bats is really now you start to author like your own band, your own organization a little bit, because at this point you've been in enough things, right? Where you're like,
yeah, I've done some other things. I'd been in bands with guys and it kind of hadn't worked out. So then I was like, okay, I'm gonna like start a band specifically like what I want to do. And that was kind of like, again, with Scotty. So Scott was playing in like a black metal band and he was like, oh, it'd be fun to do something that's a little bit more like different, kind of like, you know, like rock, punk, hardcore sort of stuff. There was like so much cool stuff happening in that like 2003, 2002 kind of era that we were like, oh man, like These Arms Are Snakes, and like there was all this like cool like Curse was happening in Black Cobra, and like there's all these cool bands. But I was like, oh, but what we want to do is like a little bit different, you know? Like I really like Every Time I Die, but we should do something that like sounds more like this, sounds more like that. So that was where we kind of felt like confident in like doing something like kind of like unique, even though it'll still like work with all this like hardcore.
So it was really you and Scott who kind of linked up first to kind of lay a little bit of the foundation, and then how did you come to get like, you know, Jay and Mikey and stuff like that and bring things together?
So that was again like Mikey didn't join until probably a year after the band had like started. So we got signed based on like this demo that Scott and I did, and like we had like these two guys. We had Joel on drums, and then we had this guy Andrew who's playing bass, who's like still like one of my best friends, does all the artwork for Cancer Bats still. But it was kind of like wasn't meant to be like a super full-time band. So then when we got signed to Distort, which is like Alexis on Fire, like the label that they were part of, we were basically like, oh man, we got to step this up. And so I like called Mikey, who I was like friends with at this time, and was like, do you want to move to Toronto? Like, we just got signed. We need like a real drummer who can tour and blah, 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 blah. So then Mikey would like move to Toronto like the next day, basically.
Wow. Really?
Yeah. Just sick.
Wow. Look at him go. The verb, the zeal for
Yeah.
Fucking, that's awesome. And was Jay always like a Toronto dude or no?
So Jay grew up in London, Ontario, and so he and I have been friends like forever since like our first hardcore bands and punk bands, like kind of like played together. But Jay, interestingly enough, he was always around Cancer Bats, so he played in like a couple different bands. He played in this really rad band that kind of sounded like Leatherface, called Cover, that were doing really good, and we were like kind of like always hesitant to ask Jay to like be a part of Bats because Cover was like so sick. So for us, like Jay helped like record that demo. Like he would be like pretty much like on stage for like half of the shows that we would play. Like he'd just be like moshing and singing along, and like was such like a good like friend of the band.
Did he also do the prerequisite number of stage dives to get into the band?
Yeah, I was like, whoa, he did 3 stage dives. No, it was more that like when we finally like needed a bass player, I like found out that like Cover wasn't doing anything anymore, and I was like, oh dude, you should join, like you should come and join Cancer Bats. And then once he was like jamming with us, he was like, man, I wish you guys had asked me like so long ago. And I was like, so funny.
You're just like, man.
Obviously, like we would have. There's my phone falling over again.
I love,
but yeah,
I love that. That's organic. That's organic vibes right there. Let the phone fall. We're having a good time. It's just a couple of friends catching up. So,
but now,
so it was kind of, it just kind of feels like it was like you toured around, you did stuff, and then like you just had these people within your community that you were like, man, if me and Scott could hook up with homeboy figure 4 is a great drummer. Like we need someone like that. And then I mean Mikey taking that chance, which is fucking sick. Good for you, Mikey. Mwah, I love you. And then Jay also always sort of being around, but also you like that's the kind of person I want. And then it was kind of like it seems like it caught a little bit of attention, and you wanted to capitalize on that. And then really the intention of the band was to just kind of continue to follow the opportunity.
Yeah. Just like tour as much as we possibly could. I mean, that was the thing too, because we had all these other bands that we were friends with that were doing like really well. So like Comeback Kid, you know, Alexis on Fire, like Silverstein. We had like Monine, all of these like guys who we've you know known through the hardcore scene, and now they're like their bands are all getting really big. And so every time I would see them, they would be like, dude, like you've got to like hurry up and get this band going. Like it was just like, come on. It was like, come on tour with us. Like, you have a T-shirt. You just made a T-shirt. Give it to me. I'll wear it in every single photo. Like, oh, you have a demo. I'll give it to like every single person I know. So like, off of that demo, we had like, you know, someone at Revelation like hit us up because they got it off of the Alexis on Fire guys. Like, we had like, you know, magazines from England being like, oh, we've heard about your band. Like, it was definitely like that like. Kind of starting a little bit later like helped us in a way, because there was just like so few bands that our friends were just like, yeah, like sick, you're ready to tour, like let's go, like we can come. Or they would like Alexis and like other bands would like not be able to do a tour, and they'd be like, oh, but you should take up Cancer Bats, like they're sick, you know. And like that's how we met the guys in Rise Against. Like that's how we met like all these people, because it was like, you know, homies recommending, like,
and that sort of scene mentality of just like helping one another out, and that's a really big and like interesting thing. Like, you know, one of the constants throughout most of the like these interviews that we've been doing now for, I mean, over 100 episodes of like whether we were talking to Walter last night or Eddie the night from Taking Back Sunday the night before, or you know, fucking, you know, Ben from Blood Incantation and stuff. It's like people within scenes and styles of music helping one another out in order to, you know, really give opportunity, and also do stuff based on, you know, just more of like that sort of scene DIY kind of like level. And it's a really wonderful thing to see. And in reality, when you're a smaller band, you know, a lot of these, as an artist, you have a lot of ability to help people out, you know, and it's a beautiful thing to sort of see how in Toronto there's definitely a big scene, and it permeates a lot of different things.
I feel like though, like all of those guys that you were saying, like they have like maybe that East Coast vibe is like so similar to us as well, where you're like trying to like help out, and like anyone who's like friends with someone else, you're like, oh, you're friends with this person, like okay, you're totally cool. And like, I feel like that, like you were saying, the Taking Back Sunday guys, like our first ever UK tour was we were like basically like going to tour with Alexis on Fire, and we somehow got added to like the side stage of Taste of Chaos. So like in between, it was Alexis on Fire, Under Oath, Anti-Flag, Taking Back Sunday. I want to say like Seosin and like Census Fail were like opening. And in between Alexis on Fire and Under Oath, because they would rotate every night, we would play like 4 songs.
Whoa.
On like the side stage, like while they were doing their changeover. We'd play, I think it was like 3 or 4 songs. And that was it. That was like our first like time in the UK. But Taking Back Sunday, we're like headlining like the whole thing, playing Brixton to like 5,500 people. But like backstage, they were just like, "Oh, sick! You're friends with like Alexis on Fire. Like, cool. Come hang out in our dressing room. Like, whatever. Like, you're part of the tour." Even though we were playing 4 songs, like in between their changeover, you're still like, "Oh, sick!"
Yeah, you're like the
we're all in this together.
You're like the intermezzo, like course, like
yeah.
Between. But no, that is a really important thing, and I think obviously with some a band like Take Back Sunday or whatever, they come, from the hardcore scene, and they've brought all that ethos like with them, and that's like a really important thing. And even Cancer Bats, whenever I've been to Toronto with any of my bands as well, has always sort of opened different doors, whether it's a place to stay, a show to play, or anything like that. So that's always been appreciated obviously on our end, but it kind of goes back to that sort of same thing of helping one another out. And one of the things that so once that stuff starts happening, right, when do you start feeling like the momentum starting to really shift for Cancer Bats, or you're like, we're starting to on our own start, like in Canada, we're starting to make a move, or maybe in Europe we're starting to make a move where you're like, oh, okay, this is starting to get different now?
I felt, we had like tons of this like amazing opportunity to like lay the groundwork for everything. So like touring on Birthing the Giant, like I said, we got to go to like Europe with like Europe and UK, all of Canada, all of the states, like with Alexis on Fire, and then we came back again with like Rise Against in the Bronx, and like did all of Europe and the UK. So by the time we were coming back, we got to tour with Gallows in 2007. That was like early days of like, again, like getting our foot in the door. Was just like me and like Frank Carter met at like a bar that Gallows was playing, and we were both like, yo, we should tour together, like before Gallows like blew up. And like just became friends, like stayed friends, like, and then that was it. It was just like Cancer Bats and Gallows are like homies in the UK, and that was kind of like from the get-go, we like hit it off with those dudes. So I felt like, again, it was like all these connections that we were making, and then we put out Hail Destroyer after our we had also toured the UK and Europe with Comeback Kid and Parkway Drive, and it was just like, so we just had like tour after tour after tour that was like amazing, and then we put out Hail Destroyer, and that was where like I felt like it like kind of like hit that next level.
Yeah.
Like, we did all this like crazy groundwork for like probably like a little over like 2 years, like solidly, and then it was just like we like finally like kind of got our shit together and like put out Hail Destroyer, which was like more what our band was like sounding like and like had become, and like that was like the biggest like kind of like 1-2, because then when we started, like we came back to the UK, it was like shows were sick. Like we went to like Canada, it was like all of a sudden like shows were like popping off, and like even when we play like the Elks Hall or like the Coldbrook like Lions Hall in like middle of nowhere, Nova Scotia, it was like there was like 300 kids or like 400 kids showed up to these shows, and we were just like, oh, like but it was crazy because like, man, we were like sleeping on floors. We had like no money. Like that whole period building up to it was like the craziest kind of like thing ever.
Sure, and like, and you guys, I mean, it's very obvious that you guys took all the chances to make the band happen, and then like to even create it by, you know, Mikey moving like this, you know,
yeah,
like being, but then also just continuing down that path. And to me, honestly, I thought that was it too, because me being here, Hail Destroyer was like, okay, who's this band? I've seen the name, but that was the song, even particularly, where I was, oh fuck, okay, you know, that riff. I was like, yes, okay, cool. Who are you guys? They're from Canada, and you guys are touring with some pretty cool bands. And I was like, oh, all right. And then you guys were out just like all the time.
Oh, dude, nonstop. It was crazy.
Obviously,
but that was again because we felt like we had to play catch up to all these other bands.
Yeah.
So we were like, oh man, we have to play like 300 shows in a year. Like that was like if we're gonna like get to this point, like we need to be playing like, you know, like 250, 300 shows in a year. And it was like, that was like our only goal. But it was also fortunate too, because like, you know, Jay just wanted to tour. Like we all had like kind of like given up, like, you know, we like sort of lived with our girlfriends when we were home, but like we didn't have like apartments or anything like that. Like we'd stay on friends' couches. So at a certain point we were just like, man, we should just book like 9 months of tour so we can just like stop, you know, like sleeping on our friends' couches and actually like go for that.
Yeah, I was just, you know, when we played together and we toured together, I was just so impressed at how, obviously the States isn't what the Europe and Canada is for cancer vets.
Yeah.
I don't know why. I don't know if you know this, but Americans are really dumb a lot of the time. But you know, what I was like, man, these guys are like, it's just the four of you, but it was just a well-oiled machine. Who's driving? What's happening? Everything was like, it was like in sync. And I was like, I'm having my 6th beer. I don't even know where I am. And I'm in my own country. It was horrible, but you guys are really great that way. And the intent of the show was always so great, like, and night after night. That's something that always impressed me about Cancer Bats. It was like, we're always going to hit this mark, whether, and then I've seen you guys in Canada, I've seen you guys in the United States, I've seen it in a lot of different places.
Yeah.
And I can confidently say I've seen you in front of 40 people and 400 people, and I've seen a similar infectious energy and sort of show and getting that like level of consistency. Do you feel like that just happened because of just how much you guys went for it?
I think a little bit of that, and also there was some, you know, those like cliche stories about like you never know who's gonna be like in the crowd.
Yeah.
Like we had a few of those like early days shows that like happened that we, in hindsight, like we were just like,
Nubia.
you know, we were like, oh, there's no one here. Let's just like, you know, we're here anyways. We're in Austin, Texas. We're playing South by Southwest. It's like 2 a.m. There's no one at this show, but like, let's just fucking give her. Like, we're here. We might as well just like play as hard as we can. And literally, like that show was like South by in like 2008, and like out from the shadows of the like darkest corners. Like, I thought we were literally playing for, like, 4 people. It ended up being, like, the guy who was, like, head of Kerrang! Magazine in the UK, CJ, who ended up becoming our manager, Stu, who ended up, like, putting out our records in Australia. Like, everyone who I had no idea was, like, at that show, like, came out of, like, the darkness and was just like, that was really sick. I would really like to work with you in the future. And we were like, this like whole idea of just like, oh man, you never know. So you should just like play your ass off even for those like 4 people that are gonna go crazy and like have at least like on that side too, like have an awesome time.
Yeah,
but I mean
you worked all day for it. right? Like you drove, you moved shit, you did it.
Yeah,
You might as well just be like, here we go.
Yeah.
Right?
You're like, this is my 20 minutes to like fucking lose it. Like, I might as well do this. But I always think back because you never know who's gonna be like also watching that show. Or if you like play a bogus set, like that person who's in the darkness is like, yeah, you know what? Like, fuck this thing, and I'm not. You know, and you maybe never even like get to talk to them.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, as far as like, you know, an energetic show that stays consistently energetic, it's probably you guys in Dillinger as far as like just like night after night, at least from my experience seeing it. And I'm like, damn, all right, cool. It's a very, it's a huge, like, I think, point of like, you know, your work and what you're doing in the moment is the most like important thing to you. And that's just what matters. And I always feel like that's really great. And I tried to take some of that stuff from like your performances, other people who are other bands that I admire, I respect. And I was like, oh, all right, cool. Like, look at the approach, you know, because you get to see those sorts of things. And I'm sure that you guys learn from other bands. What bands kind of drove you to have that sort of approach as well? Was there anybody coming up that you saw, you're like, I like what they're doing?
Yeah, well, I mean, I remember we were really lucky because we were so close to Buffalo. We used to get to open up for Every Time I Die, like all the time. So seeing like what you were talking about, like a well-oiled machine, like seeing that band like be like loading their own gear, they would like stretch before the gig when like I hadn't seen anybody doing that, and they were just like, oh, get ready to like dominate, and then they would play like the craziest show ever. And you're like, oh yeah, this is like sports. Like, okay, I should, you know, like figure out. And then Keith is like really funny, and like it's like that sort of vibe of just like, oh, I gotta really like step this up. And that was like early days. So that was like when we were like before we got signed, like when we were just like kind of like fresh. We got like thrown on like a few shows with like those dudes. We got to tour with like A Life Once Lost. I remember being like, oh, these guys shred like every single night. They're like super heavy. They play super tight. Like, okay, we gotta like step up. So I felt like getting to play with like all those like American bands. We definitely like kind of like saw, you know, the like the bar was raised.
For sure. I feel like it's always interesting to see what you learn from your peers and different folks. And like, there's no manual to this sort of thing. So it's until you get like these sorts of different experiences that you really start, you know, picking shit up and like kind of, and learning, you know? And it's really cool. Again, it's like, if you get to open for certain bands or they take you under their wing a little bit, like that's always really cool. So obviously, you know, you guys, I feel like for the next couple of records, you guys kind of, I feel continue to kind of hone like this Cancer Bat sound that was kind of on Hail Destroyer and like kind of moving forward. And then you guys for the, you know, like the record you guys did with Ross, I feel to me that was a big turning point. I feel like Hail Destroyer and then the subsequent records were like, this is cool. This isn't the Cancer Bat's world and sound that like I understood it. And I thought it was getting better and more refined. And then there was like, you were opening up your kind of vocals a little bit more into different sort of areas. But I think when you guys did that last record with Ross, it was like, we're going wherever the fuck, what was that like to open up?
The thing that I always think is crazy about working with like super talented producers is I feel like they always make a huge impact on the immediate record. Obviously, like the album, so like Searching for Zero, like obviously we're in with Ross, and you know, like he has like a huge influence on all that, and like I love what happened. But I think the craziest thing is that now that we've like learned from this like amazing, you know, like this like guru essentially has like taught us so much. It's like we then put so much more of those lessons like into writing the next album. So I always think it's like almost like a discredit because like Ross like not only like produced, in my opinion, like Searching for Zero, but also like produced like so much in just like his influence in terms of like what we ended up doing with The Spark That Moves. And I remember talking to like so many people who've worked with Ross like afterwards, like talking with like the Norma Jean guys, and they were just like, dude, like after you work with Ross Robinson, like the way that you look at music is completely different. So like everything after Ross is now like in this Ross method, in so many like regards. So I almost feel like what Ross taught me like didn't really get a chance to shine, especially in terms of like my vocal confidence. Like so much of what he like taught me and then I could put into practice in touring and then put into practice in writing, like led to like some of those like really cool songs that like came off of Spark That Moves too. So like the ideas of like, you know, True Zero I think is like such a sick song, or like Beelzebub is such a sick song, and then I was like able to like take that and like be like, oh okay, now I can actually sing, and I can like actually sing like a melody, and I can actually like impart some of this melody into like some of these songs. And like I don't know, I always think it's like it's a shame because people are like, oh, let's talk about this new person that you recorded with. And like obviously JP like added his own flair into like what we were doing, and like that's gonna continue on. But I always feel bad because I'm like, but I still want to credit like this person.
Sure.
And I don't want to credit.
It's like a moment that felt like to me like a shift. It was just
Yeah.
that moment. It like the whole thing like moved in this other sort of, you know, there's I think a little bit more of like a kind of just like more of a mid-tempo like metal kind of like rock guitar influence, which like Scope definitely always had that in his like listening. I feel like when we would talk about metal and things of like that he would like and stuff like that, and just like it really felt like that moment. It was like, okay, you guys had kind of honed this thing for a while that was kind of the signature sound to a point, and then you guys made this move, and it was a great move, you know?
Yeah. I like 100%. I think it's so interesting to like look at any of that stuff and like how, yeah, just like what you said, like how things like shift, and then like again, Forever is like a band. Like you look at like Glassjaw, it's like Glassjaw can continue to like keep making like this really rad stuff, but you think about like how much of that like that influence and that creativity is like as a result of like this person.
Yeah.
You know? Or like to me, like I always think about like how At the Drive-In, you know, was such like an incredible band, but like to me it like really opens up like Mars Volta.
Yeah,
and you're like,
definitely, because it's just on a progression of like the journey of these different people as like musicians and how they see things, you know, and the perspective that you bring to your work. And like, you know, at one point we're like hardcore kids from London and Halifax and other places, you know, but then you go and you see the world and you play with all these different bands, and you're taking all these things in as well. You're learning to be a band and stuff like that. And a lot of the things that I always talk about in this, you know, show, one of the most important things is just showing that this has been, you know, 20 years of your life. Like this is a long play progression towards becoming, you know, the artists that like we all really like today. It's like this doesn't happen overnight. This is blood, sweat, and tears, a lot of hard work to get to this point. So if the founder of Spotify is out there listening to this, think about that.
Well, I think it's like also like you said, like all those people that you meet and you see who are like inspiring too. Like, not to keep bringing up his name, but Walter Trifles, like, dude, you want to talk about like one of the most inspiring people like in music and like just like life vibe.
Yeah.
But like who's just like constantly putting out like amazing like works of art, and like just like, you know, never pigeonholing himself and like being so humble about the whole thing. You're just like, this is such like a cool vibe that like I aspire to like even, you know, come close to that kind of trajectory.
Sure, yeah, and I mean, and those are the sorts of things. And when you get like a little window in to seeing what those things are like, it's really like a beautiful thing. So we got about like 5 minutes left. So
oh shit,
yeah, it goes quick, right? It's just that's what it is, you know.
Living, we're talking about grades.
Yeah,
We're
I
hanging.
mean, you know, we're just flying around here. But before, you know, we wrap up, you know, I know that you've done some collaborations outside of the band as a singer. Do you want to talk a little bit about how you got with Matt from Bullet for My Valentine and some of that sort of stuff, and
Oh
how
yeah.
does that sort of feel to be asked to sing on things in a way?
I mean, that's like my favorite is like doing something like basically like getting asked to do these projects that I never would have expected to like sing in like Axe Wound, which is like Matt Tuck from Built from a Valentine's Band, which is like so rad. Like that was such like a fun experience. So like recently I got asked to like sing on like this amazing dude Snails. He's like a dubstep like artist. I like sing on like two crazy like Snails tracks, and it's like all of these things that I'm just like, you know, getting a chance to do as from being in this like Canadian hardcore band. But at the end of it, it's like you learn so much from like working with these different people, and like in the end, I always feel like it makes Cancer Bats like a better band when I come back to it after like working on these other like projects and like with these other like super creative like inspiring people is like such like a rad. And like for me, I'm always just like, yeah, like I just want to do everything.
Yeah, yeah, no, I'm always excited to, you know, sing backups on a record or have a little part in this sort of thing. It's just really fun and really nice. And when you see how other people do things, it's always fun and eye-opening, especially obviously when you respect them and you get to kind of walk into their world a little bit and sort of see what that's like. So that being said, walking into worlds, I hope that I can walk into your world in Toronto or Halifax or wherever the fuck you are in Canada, and I hope you can walk into mine in New York sometime sooner than later. Liam, it's been fucking great to catch up with you. You're fucking awesome.
So stoked we got to hang.
I miss you, and I hope to see you sometime soon. And I'll talk to you later, man. All right? Take care of yourself.
Yeah, come to Halifax. Come stay at my house.
I'll come to Halifax, and you can teach me how to ride a motorcycle.
Yeah, I'll teach you how to wheelie.